another track on the album, Better By You, Better Than Me, which is obviously a Spooky Tooth
That's right, yeah.
cover version, but it hit the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Years later, after you left the band in 1990, it was using a lawsuit. Two American teenagers sort of attempted to commit suicide. One died later on. And obviously went to a famous court case. Was you involved in that court case yourself?
I, like you, watched it on TV,
Yeah.
because I was out of the band maybe 10 years after that. And I thought that whole thing was just ludicrous, you know. For a start off, if there was any logic in that accusation,
because the accusation was
or did it take 10 years for anyone to do what they did, you know?
Yeah.
Secondly, why would a band want their fans to commit suicide? You know, that's just nuts. I mean, you're going to have nobody to buy your records and nobody to buy your concert tickets. You know what I mean? It's just stupid. And of course, I was there for all the recordings, and I knew that there was no mention of putting subliminal messages. And secondly, I don't know anybody that's got a record deck that goes in reverse. You know, mine only goes in one way. You know, so I guess if you're going to play something backwards and to listen, why would you do it in the first place?
So I think what the court case was picking up on, they played it backwards, and they could hear something like "do it." But as Will Pelford proved, you could also hear peppermint.
That's right, yeah. But you take any record and play it backwards, you can hear things, whatever you pick up on, and it's just coincidence, you know. But yeah, I thought the whole thing was just daft. But I thought it could only happen in America.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
But the bizarre thing about that, if you flip the album over, on the other side, there's a song that you co-wrote, Beyond the Realms of Death.
Yeah.
And is that about suicide itself, that song, or not?
I think that would qualify more so, yeah. Funny enough, I didn't write it that way.
Yeah.
I when we were making the album, and I used to visit Birmingham quite a lot for rehearsals for that, to shape the songs up. And we would demo the songs first in a little tiny studio up in Birmingham before we went into a proper major studio with a producer. And that meant that the producer, we could send the demos to the producer and say, this is the songs we want to record, so he could hear them and come up with suggestions of anything he wanted to add in. Sorry, what was your question again?
Well, basically about the song Beyond the Realms of Death, you wrote.
Yeah, okay, well, the thing I felt was missing was most of the songs were very up-tempo. I mean, Exciter, for example. And I thought, midway in the set, it's nice to drop the tempo down and create a bit of light and shade. And we didn't have a song that fitted that. So I went home and I picked up an acoustic guitar at home. And I had a Revox, which I don't know if you know, it's a reel-to-reel machine that was made by Studer, which is a company that made all the big 24-track recorders for studio. So it was studio quality. And you could bounce tracks back and forth. So I just put a little beatbox on and I came up with the song, you know, and I played it myself on acoustic guitar and then overdubbed an electric guitar and a bass. And I asked Steve Mann, who the guitarist from Lionheart and Michael Schenker. He lived quite near to me at the time, and I asked him to come round to my place and play the solo on it, which he did. And then but there was no lyrics, and I thought, you know, Rob had such a strong identity with his lyrics and his vocal style. I thought it's best to leave that to him, you know, because he tended to write most of even the stuff that Glenn wrote, Rob would write the lyrics. And same with KK. So I played it to them at a rehearsal. And I got a weird way of playing guitar. I've never had a guitar lesson in my life. I never really wanted to be a guitar player. But I thought it's a useful tool for any drummer to learn a melodic instrument as well, and learn about chord structures and learn how to compose. So if you're going to write stuff, it's a useful tool to have. And so I picked up a guitar I'm right-handed, and I picked up a guitar by the neck, like so. and just automatically swiveled it round like that. So I'm now holding it as a left-handed guitarist, you know. And I always felt that holding down chord shapes and all that was a lot trickier than strumming. You know, the first time you learn a few chords on a guitar, you're just strumming and playing different chord shapes. And I thought that was the easy bit. So I did that with my left hand and did the hard part with my right hand. But of course, I never played a left-handed guitar. I was playing a right-handed guitar with right-handed stringing. So the chord shapes are all different, you know, from that point. There are a few guitar players who do play that way. I think it's a guy called, I'm not sure, I know there's a few guys that actually do play that way. But so when I've showed them the chords for it, I'm showing it to them like this. No, what's that chord? So yeah, but they liked the song, and I said, "Oh, Bob, could write some lyrics for it." So he came up with the title and the concept of the song, you know, which is quite a heavy subject, you know. So.
Were you happy with his lyrics when you first heard them?
Yeah. The more I heard them, I thought it was quite an interesting concept, you know. And who knows what goes on in Rob's head? You know, all this stuff comes out, you know. So yeah, and it's become a Judas Priest classic, you know. I wish I was making the money from it that I should have made, you know, because that's another sore subject. The publishing on that was stolen, you know. So yeah, so it's something I would have, if I'd remained in the band, I would have wanted to develop on and contribute to the writing as well, because I think I'm probably the only drummer that they had that really contributed to the writing. I don't think Ian has ever written anything for the band. It's mainly been coming from Glenn and KK.
Rob mainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Ian's done a couple, I think, but yeah, mainly them three.
So it was nice to have another input and somebody else coming from a different direction, you know. I think the song worked great because it starts off acoustically. I think we had a 12-string acoustic on the intro, and then it builds up into a big heavy riff, you know. So it fitted in nicely with the musical concept for the band, and it also provided that bit of light and shade within the set, you know. So it's not just all boom, 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 and it's just, we can take it down a bit here and then build it back up again.
Actually, we're going back to Les Binks' Priesthood. You played all these great classics, but one song you didn't play, which I was very surprised, was Take on the World, which got a big sort of arithmetic drum intro.
Yeah. So, well, again, that was actually Glenn that came up with that idea.
Oh.
And it was more, you know, because he heard Queen's We Will Rock You, and you know, there's actually no drums on that record at all. It's just stomping your feet and slaps and just multi-tracked, and it's probably done on a big studio with parquet flooring or, you know, wooden flooring. So when you double track that several times, it becomes massive and sounds very percussive. Well, there's no actual drums on it, and he wanted to do something that was percussive because there's no bass on either of those tracks, just guitar and drums. And so I come up with the rhythmic pattern for that, and there's actually 2 bass drums in that. And then to make it massive, we double tracked it several times. I think there might be somewhere between 4 and 6 drum kits on that, all playing the same thing. So it made the sound really big. And when we played it live, we couldn't reproduce that live, so we used the original drum track through the PA, and I played along with it, because the only way we could recreate that. It was a bit like when I did the tour with 10cc. They couldn't reproduce I'm Not in Love live, so they used a tape, you know, which had all the multi-track vocals and stuff. And I think they just did the live vocal live and a few of the instruments live.
I think Take on the World was number 14 hit single in the UK.
It was the first single that hit the charts, and we did Top of the Pops with that. And we also recorded a promo film for that at the Brighton Dome. That, and I think we recorded 2 tracks there. One was Take on the World and the other was Killing Machine itself.
Oh. There's a cover version which was available, I believe, originally on the American version. They put it on the re-release CDs for the British version of Green Menelishi, the two-pronged crown. Originally a song written by Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
But the Priest version is completely different. It's very metalised. And whose idea was that to speed it up? How did that version come about?
As far as I can remember, if you think back to the very first album they did for CBS Columbia, the Sin After Sin album, there's a track on that, which is a Joan Baez song, right? And I think that was the record company that suggested that. Diamonds and Rust.
Yeah, Diamonds and Rust, yeah.
So, quite often, record companies would be thinking about hit singles off an album. When you make an album, what are we going to put out as a single off that? So, they would suggest doing certain songs. I wasn't there when they did the Sin After Sin one, so I don't know if that's true in that case, but I know that when we did the Stained Class album, it was a record company that suggested Better By You, Better Than Me. And we all liked the song, so nobody objected to doing it. And but you got to give it your own treatment, you know. There's no point in doing it just the way the original one was done, because it's just a copy. So we gave it our own treatment. The same thing with Green Menelishi. I think that was suggested by the record company as well. And of course, we're all big fans of Peter Green, you know. That version of Fleetwood Mac is my favourite version. The other American one is a totally different concept altogether. They're both good in their own right, but I loved Peter Green's playing, you know, and it was such a shame that things went the way they did with him, because he was a huge influence, you know. So when we went to play that, we thought, what were we going to do with it? So we just gave it the Judas Priest treatment, and it came out that way. You know, that was the way we wanted to interpret it.
So I think even today, there's a lot of fans out there who don't realise it is a cover version.
Yeah, I suppose
it is totally
depends which version you heard first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know? And if you listen to the Peter Green version, it's much slower. It's really slow. You know, it's actually quite hard.
Very dark. Yeah, very doom. Yeah.
In fact, after Richie joined the band, Richie Faulkner, he did the Epitaph tour, which was pretty much a 1-year tour. And I met up with him in Camden, and we jammed together, and that was one of the songs we played. And I deliberately played it much slower, because I think the tendency is when you're playing live is to speed things up, you know. Things tend to be played faster, like the adrenaline starts flowing when you're playing live. And that song sounds better when it's held back a bit. And we played it live, and I played it much slower, you know. Not as slow as the original, but slower. He commented on it afterwards, you know, because they're so different feel from what you've been used to playing it live with the band, you know. But it was nice to see Richie again.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy, and he's doing really well.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about him in a second before we ran his interview up. Just sticking to your time in Priesthood for a second. Your last album with them was the live album, Unleashed in the East.
Yeah.
Recorded live at Tokyo. Some people sort of say, "Oh, Unleashed in the studio." Can you sort of go more on that myth? Was it live? Was it studio?
Okay. Well, it's. I can assure you the drums are all live, because I wasn't even in the studio. You know, I had been on a different setup from the rest of the band. I wasn't contracted to the record company, and so I was working as still within a session framework. And the only way I could get paid for albums was to take a fee up front, and that was how I performed on the first 2 albums. And then when it came to, it was our second tour of Japan, and I'd just taken possession of a new kit from Pearl drums, and who were manufactured in Japan, and they had arranged for me to pick up the drums that I asked them to provide at the venue that we were playing in Tokyo. And I went down there in the afternoon with my drum tech, because we had to get everything set up for the first time, brand new kit, you know, and iron out any little teething problems there might be. So we got the kit set up. I had to tune it all up, get it how I wanted it. And normally, I normally have some small holes cut in the front heads, which you can put mics in. And I didn't have the tools with me to do that, you know. So, in fact, those shows were recorded with a solid head on the front of the bass drums, which gives a different sound. But I noticed when I went down there to pick up the drums that there was a 24-track mobile recorder being set up by CBS Sony, and they're rolling cables in and engineers setting up mics everywhere to record the gig. And the band's manager was with us in Tokyo, and I said to him, "What's happening about the recording? Because we haven't discussed making a live recording, you know." I said, "Oh, don't worry about it, Les. You know, it's just for CBS Sony's sake. You know, don't worry. We'll sort it out later. You know. So what can you do in the middle of a tour? You know." So we went straight from Japan to America, and we spent about at least 3 or 4 months touring America, and we did a lot of gigs with UFO, and we came back to the UK, and we did a 2-week tour, which was sold out. I finished up 2 nights at Hammersmith, and then we took a break, and I was the only guy in the band that was musically active outside of the band, you know, because as soon as we finished a tour and we took a break, I would contact my session contacts in London and say, "Look, I'm around again. Any sessions, let me know. I'll be up for it." So I'd be working with other people in studios and stuff. And then I got a call from their manager. He asked me to come into the office and he said, "Discuss the band's next move." You know, so I said, "Fine." So when I went in to meet him, he said, "The guys are at Startling Studios in Ascot, which is Ringo Starr's studio. And it's the old house that was owned by John Lennon. It's featured in the video for Imagine, the white, white. Right? Well, he sold that to Ringo, and Ringo built a studio in it and called it Startling Studios. So the guys are all there and they're listening to the recordings from Japan, and it sounds great. And so that we think this could be the next album." So he said, "We had a lot of inquiries from fans. When's the band going to make a live album?" So I said, "Okay, fine." I said, "No, I wondered why I hadn't been invited to the studio to have a listen to it myself, you know." So then he came up with a ridiculous statement. He said, we think it'd be a nice gesture on your behalf if you were to waive your fees on this occasion. In other words, not take any payment for it, which is ridiculous, you know. And I believe the album eventually went platinum, you know, which is ridiculous. So that was the beginning of the end, really, because I couldn't deal with people like that, you know. That's not the way you do business with people, you know. It's an insult to someone who's been actively involved in it.
But were they trying to kick you out because they didn't like you personally or professionally, or they had something?
Well,
you know?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was just the management. I think, who knows?
Yeah.
But all I could do was react to the situation that I was faced with. And a lot of it was pure anger and disbelief that I could be treated with such lack of respect and so on and so forth. You know, so that sowed the seeds for my departure from the band. And I never ended up in the studio to hear the tracks or to see what way it was sounding.
I can assume from what you say, when you left the band, you didn't get a chance to say goodbye to the rest of the band or get
No, the band, because don't forget, nobody had mobile phones in those days, right? Yeah. So I had their home numbers, I think, for some of the guys in the band. But we only came together for the band activities. We weren't together socially, you know, and there was a big gap between them up in Birmingham.
Right, so yeah, you don't know. Yeah.
So the only time we spent time together was through the band, in activities of the band, and no, I didn't have any discussions with the band at all, and I was rather upset that nobody bothered to contact me and say, look, our manager has told us you're leaving. What's the problem? You know,
a lot of time the management have told them something completely different to what they told you.
Exactly,
we only find out years later. Yeah.
So when you've got somebody who's a go-between, things can get misconstrued along the line, you know. But I made up my mind then that I didn't want to stay. You know, I couldn't stay in a situation where I didn't feel valued. You know, it was like. It was a hard situation to deal with, you know. So I decided, well, I've got these other situations. I've got my session work and all that. And don't forget, back then the band was still on the way up, and everybody. When I spoke to KK recently, he told me that the serious money didn't really come in until the mid-80s, right?
Well, Screaming for Vengeance really, where the big money came in.
Yeah. I was later on, and thankfully they'd switched management by then, because within 6 months to a year of me leaving, the management company went into liquidation, and these guys had a reputation for just running a company for a maximum of 4 or 5 years, running up debts, and then putting the company into a limited company into receivership, and you get the assets out and you put it into the new company. They had always set up, register a new company with what's it called, Companies House, register it in advance of closing the other one down, so they could transfer assets from that one to that one, and then start up the new company. And that's a long story as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was that.
One question I'd like to ask you about your time in Priest. Obviously, Rob Halford, he declared in 1988 that he's a gay man. If that's in 2018, nobody would bat an eyelid, it wouldn't even be front page news. But obviously the band must have known back in the 70s. And in the 70s it was a completely different time. Freddie Mercury had to keep quiet about his sexuality, same as Elton John and a lot of other people. As a band, did you all know he was a gay man? Was it a known thing within the band? And did you have to hide, as a gang, cover up for him?
It was well known within the band, obviously, because you can't be that closely involved with each other to not notice, you know. And I remember that Rob had a boyfriend then, who was, I think he was a male nurse, and lived up in Birmingham, and I met him on a few occasions. But Rob's a real nice guy, you know, and there's certain elements in the male straight psyche that have different views on people of a different sexual persuasion, you know. It's never bothered me, you know, and I think straight people have got nothing to fear from gay people, you know, because, you know, everyone knows their own kind and their own people who are of the same persuasion as they are, so they don't bother, you know. Straight.
But was it difficult to keep it hidden from the press, or make sure certain men of the press don't report on it?
I think, well, you've got to look at the audience, you know. When we played the UK specifically, a large part of the audience was male. They had denim jackets with badges all over it, you know, hairy guys, you know, bikers and all this sort of stuff, and they were quite macho, you know. So I think, as you say, back in those days, there was a certain stigma attached to being gay, and what effect would it have on your fans if you came out and admitted to people. So they didn't want to take that risk, and it was kept quiet, you know, but not within the band and in the immediate circle, because obviously everybody was aware. But it wasn't a problem for anyone. It didn't create a problem for anybody in the band, you know. So, just that we had more groupies to go around, you know. Because when we went to the States, it was the other way around. It was a lot more females, you know. But in the UK, it was a lot more males in the audience, you know. So I just think it was politics, you know. You don't want to upset the boat, you know. But I think it was wise for him to come out in the end and you know, be open about it, because why not? You know?
Exactly, yeah.
It's not
like, thankfully in 2018 there's still some stigmas attached.
The guy's an incredible singer.
99% people don't care less.
You know, he's proved himself time and time again.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'll say, so you left Judas Priest. What did you do immediately afterwards? You said you got back into session work, or?
Yeah, I was always doing session work anyway.
Yeah.
In between tours. So I just can't. See, the thing is, when I started off, I got an interest in music. That was it. It was the music that was more important to me. I just wanted to make a living as a musician. And I found it challenging going into studio sessions. Half the time you didn't know what you were going to be asked to play. Because you had people called session fixers, who would book you for sessions for various artists, and it was so you arrive at the studio, and the first time you get an opportunity to find out what they wanted you to play was when they sit down and either play the song acoustically or on a piano, or give you a chart to read, and it might be just as simple as a chord sheet, you know, but at least you could follow the part through, and 9 times out of 10 they'll be looking to you as a drummer to come up with an inventive, creative drum part that suited the song, and the motive is to play for the song, you know. So no matter what chops you have, technical abilities you have, it's down to listening to the song and deciding what is the most appropriate thing to play for that song. And if it just requires bass drum, snare, hi-hat, then that's all you play, you know. But if it requires more than that, then you embellish it and add to that. And it's quite satisfying to walk into a room with an artist who maybe never met before, and perform a song, listen to the playback, and think that sounds great, you know, and it all knits together, and the chemistry's right for that song, and they showed their appreciation to you afterwards, and that's quite satisfying to do that. So, you see, I never wanted to be a rock star. That was never my ambition. I just wanted to be a musician, you know, and so walking away from that band, I was quite happy to be the backroom boy again.
Did you miss it at all or not?
I enjoyed touring America specifically because I toured America before I joined Priest with Fancy, so I kind of knew what to expect. And America was, being such a vast country, it was more geared up for putting on big shows, and
well, they invented arena rock, really, the Americans.
Stadium rock, yeah. And that was the thing here in the UK. I couldn't understand the mentality of the record companies, because around the time I joined Priest was the start of punk.
Yeah.
You know, and record companies were thinking, this is a new thing. You know, we want to sign punk bands.
You went totally against that grain, because you didn't affect metal when punk was explosive.
And so America wasn't looking for that, and that's the big market. America is if you can crack it in America, you've made it, you know. So and most of the punk bands here in the UK were playing small venues where you could spit at each other and you know. And I thought this is never gonna take off big time in America, you know. That was where the American market was so important for a band like Priest, you know.
And you know, you live in West London, and you've always sort of kept yourself busy in that area, gigging and little, you know, you seem quite comfortable gigging in a local area. And one of the sort of acts you've been involved with over the years, and it's Metalworks, which we just mentioned earlier. You worked with Richie Faulkner long before he joined Judas Priest, you know, and Davey Rimmer has now gone on to UO Heap.
Yeah.
So tell us more about Metalworks for people who may be aware of them.
Well, that came about through a guy called Steph, and I can't remember for the life of me his second name, but he played guitar and whatever, and he called me and asked me if I would come down and check out his band, which was called Metalworks, and this was up in Camden, and it's in a place that burnt down. It was right opposite the stables, the market in Camden, which is very busy at the weekends, so you used to get a lot of people. He did it on a Sunday. And,
still does.
Yeah, and used to get a lot of people come in from the markets, a lot of tourists and young people that came in. They could hear the music from outside. And he asked me to come down, so I went down to have a listen to the band, and he had a good technique of finding good guitar players, good musicians. And so he always surrounded himself with good players. And he asked me to go up and play some numbers with him, and I got up and jammed with him, did a few stuff, mostly all metal stuff, you know. And then you had a drummer at the time, and they used to do quite a long set. So he asked me to do some shows with him, and I said, well, I'll do part of it, you know. So he used another drummer for the first half, and I would join them later in the evening and do the evening slot with him. And then I introduced them to some friends of mine. I introduced them to a guitarist called Pete Friesen.
Oh, right, yeah, that's Cooper.
Yeah, well, I was working with Pete in another situation, and I introduced them to Pete. Pete did it for a while. Pete was with Alice Cooper's band. He appears in what's it called? Wayne's World. And has a few spoken words in that backstage with Alice Cooper. But and then he was in the Almighty as well. Yeah. So he's a great guitar player. He's a Canadian guy, and so we had Pete in the band now for a while, and there was another guitar player called Steve Forward who was very good as well, and then he left, and I said, "Where are you going to get someone to replace him?" He said, "I know someone's even better, you know." He said, I used to have to go and pick him up when he was 16 or something, to do gigs, because obviously he's still a minor, you know, and he had to get his parents' permission to do gigs. So this guy arrived at a gig one week, and it was Richie, tall guy, long blonde hair, you know, looked the part, played a Les Paul. And he was brilliant, you know, just real naturally talented guy, and just and very fast with his technique as well. So and he was only about 21, 22 then when I met him. So we worked together. It was me and Pete Friesen, and then Davey Rimmer joined on bass as well, and a lot of people would turn up at that venue and get up and do and play with the band. So we had all kind of we had Nico McBrain from Maiden turned up one day and got up and demolished my drum kit. So I knew Nico from his days with Pat Travers.
Oh yeah.
Because they were managed by the same company that was managing Judas Priest at the time. So they had the Pat Travers band, and they had Dave Stewart and what's her name from the Eurythmics, Annie Lennox, They were in a band prior to that called the Tourists.
Tourists.
Yeah, and they were managed by the same company that managed Priest when I was with them.
Oh, yeah.
But Nico was working with Pat Travers' band then, and we used to rehearse at Pinewood Studios, and I remember we were rehearsing at Pinewood. At the time, they were making the very first Superman movie, and they were filming that scene where he's pushing a helicopter up in a. But Pat was rehearsing at the same time, Pat Travers' band, and he asked me to get up and play with the band, and I got up and played, and there was pressure being put on me at that time to swap seats, but I didn't want to rock the boat, but because eventually that management company split up, and the guy David Hemmings, who I mentioned earlier, decided to manage Pat's band and from America, so he moved to New York and set up an office there and continued to manage Pat Travers' band. At that point, I think Nico had left and joined Maiden.
I think he went to a French band called Trust first, then Maiden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that they had Tommy Aldridge for a while.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, because we did some gigs with them out there.
Yeah.
Tommy was on drums then.
And just going back to Metalworks with Richie.
Yeah. So
when he did get the job with Priest, did that surprise you, or do you think, yeah, too bleeding right?
What happened was, in actual fact, it was Pete Friesen they approached originally.
All right.
And they had, this must have been 2011, because that's when KK left the band, and they just set up a whole year tour. This is the Epitaph tour.
Yeah.
Which was rumoured to be their final tour,
tour, yeah.
Which is why they called it their Epitaph tour, I presume. And that was when things broke down between KK and the rest of the band, and he left. And somebody must have recommended Pete, I don't know who, but Pete got a call from the management, and the problem was that Pete is married to an English girl, and he's very much in love with her, very devoted to her, and they were about to have their first child. Mm-hmm. So he didn't want to leave her, go away for an entire year, leave her holding the baby, and not having that first year of experiencing a child, or first child's life. So he turned it down. But he said, I know someone who'd be perfect. And he recommended Richie. And I think Richie had been working with, what's his name, Harris, the bass player from...
Steve Harris? Lauren Harris, yeah, his daughter, Lauren Harris, yeah.
His daughter.
Yeah.
Lauren Harris.
That's it, yeah.
And she has a band, and Richie had been in her band, and they'd done a tour with Maiden, opening up for them. So apparently he got a call. He got an email from somebody. Managed to get his email address, and I got an email from I think it was Jane Andrews, who's their manager. Would he be interested in the job at Priest, And he thought it was a wind-up. So he never answered it. He thought somebody's winding me up here, So he ignored it, and then a while later he got a second email from them. And this time he thought it through. He thought it might be worth a call just to check it out. And it turned out to be the genuine thing. So I think Glenn invited him to come up to his house, or he has a studio in his house as well, but I think they made the Firepower album. And he just thought, give him show us what you can do, So he was immediately impressed with him, and we got the gig,
Excellent.
So it was quite a thing for him. But see, I always felt when I met Richie that he was born in the wrong era.
Yeah.
If he'd been around in the 70s, he would have been a big star straight away, But he got there in the end anyway.
Well, I've seen him with Priest a few times, and I think he does an absolute excellent job. You know, it's a very hard one. He's in KK's shoes, as you say. You know, does a marvellous job. Just sticking with Metalworks for a second. You just mentioned Nicky McBrain from Maiden, and with Metalworks, it's also Tony Parsons guested from quite a lot. He was in the Maiden early days.
Tony was involved when I first.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, he was involved earlier on.
I think Dennis Wilcox. Did you sing with him? Dennis Wilcox, Maiden singer.
I don't think I was around, but at that point, no.
Yeah.
Because I used to do it periodically.
Exactly, yeah.
And it was just fun to do, you know.
Yeah.
And you never knew who was going to turn
exactly,
up, you know. Who else was there? I think Paul Diano got up a few times, and so I used to get all these people turning up, and Steve Mann was
anybody watching this interview, I think it's virtually every Sunday in Camden. I forget the name of the pub now. Is it not the Mark?
Well, I know that the one that I did with them.
You always Google it. Metalworks in Camden.
The one that I did with them was burnt down. At a huge fire, and so that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But I think there's still some version of it. I haven't been there for years. At a pub called the Monarch.
Here's the Monarch,
in Camden.
It's always a good night out.
Down towards Chalk Farm Way.
Oh well, that's been fantastic talking to you. It's one of the longest interviews I've ever done. So, Les Binks Priesthood. Hopefully we'll see you on the road soon. And of course you've got Devil Driver single, Beyond the Realms of Death.
Yeah, that's coming up on the 1st of June.
So it's
available as a download from all the usual sources, you know.
And who knows where that might lead to.
Who knows, just watch this space.
Yeah, Les, been wonderful talking to you. All the best for the future. Thank you.